Hello, I'm Jacques Halbronn. I am wanting to tell you more about French astrology and continue my lectures on the subject. What is the recent development of my research? In fact, I reached the conclusion that I have to be more minimal about astrology, which means to give up the attempt to explain certain things by astrology. The question of the limits of astrology is always a major issue. And we are all guilty of trying to go beyond those limits, I'm afraid. Sometimes, the problem is that sometimes we have some results in our predictions, and we are sometimes prisoners of those results. So the great risk in astrology is not to fail, is to succeed sometimes. There are very famous predictions which in fact are based on errors. And those errors will confirm wrong methods, wrong systems. Be careful about successes, victories of astrology. They hide sometimes very deep mistakes. So, for instance, the idea of disjunction that I introduced previously is a rather queer idea when we think about it. Because what? It's a tricky idea. It's ingenious, I would say, of course. But ingenious doesn't mean it's true or it's advisable. The conjunction is something which you can see. I don't say it exists physically, but you can see it. You can see a planet and aligned with some other planet or some other stars. Yeah, you can see that. And people of the past in antiquity could do the same. Which means it doesn't include, of course, the trans-Saturnian planets or the asteroids. And an aspect which is not a conjunction, because a conjunction is not an aspect. Right? The word aspect means, in the old technical vocabulary of astrology in the 13th century, it was a regard. You look at. You cannot look at something which is just with you. You look when you have a certain distance between A and B. When A and B are conjuncted, there's no look, there's no attention to the other because they are just connected directly, conjuncted. Now if you say connected, it's already a matter of expression. You can be connected and distant. Doesn't work. An aspect is something you cannot see. You can calculate an aspect. You can say there is 90 degrees between this and this. But this is an abstraction. This is fictive. Because astronomically, it's just a moment, just an instant. It's not essential. Anyway, the point is that we can see a conjunction. We can see two factors which were separated being together. And we can see that these factors which were together are not any longer together. That you can see. More than that you cannot see. You can imagine, you can calculate, but you don't see. And your body doesn't see. And astrology has something to do with your body. It's your body, it's your senses, your perception, which is the basis of astrology. Your visual perception or your subconscious perception, your subconscious visual perception, which is the major issue, the major axis of astrology. So, when I tried recently, well, not so recently, when I tried to explain that the whole cycle of 7 years was structured in conjunction and disjunction, etc., etc., so that any moment of the cycle could be defined in its specificity. That was in fact a mistake. Typically the astrological mistakes actually, because it has to do with the old dream of astrologer is to give the 12 signs in order to structure the cycle of any star taken in the word, in general word of planet and star. And in French, because in the old French, even probably in English too, the word star initially was also used for planet and fixed stars, and planet itself is just an adjective, which means moving, moved, which moves. So planet in Greek means moving. Moving what? Moving star. So I decided that I would focus from now on only on the conjunctions and what immediately precedes conjunctions, to show that there is a certain moment of a change of scale, and what comes after the conjunction, and also with this change of scale. Because in fact, what is important is what happens when the conjunction appears and when it disappears. The rest is neutral. So we are not going to study anything apart from this conjunction and what comes before and after, immediately before and immediately after. And the rest will be left. We're not concerned by the rest. We're not going to introduce astrology in a no man's land, in a way. So from now on, we only concentrate on the conjunction and the effect of what happens with and without the conjunction, but just at the same time, at this time. Because when the conjunction has disappeared, it has an immediate effect. It's like when you leave someone, when someone leaves you, it has an effect. But after a certain moment, it vanishes, the effect vanishes, tends to vanish. And this is not any more striking. So it's only when it's like in love, when it's the start is important, when it begins to appear, and the ending is also important. But in the meantime, between the ending and the start, there is a whole space which is unoccupied, which is neutral. And astrology has not to study this neutral thing. Like in love, you don't have to study the moment where you are stopped the relationship with someone and you have not started something else. You are in a sort of purgatory, from sort of meantime. That is a mistake that I want to correct. It is not that I underestimate the dialectic. The conjunction is a rising of the male, the rising of the superman, the rising of the leader, the guide, the Führer, the Dulce. the rise, whatever, the head, the president. But, of course, when the leader is not called in sort of way, called by the conjunction, because the conjunction in fact calls the leaders, says, leaders, come on, get up, appear, reappear, come back. So that's a time of leaders. Conjunction is a time of the leader which approaches, which culminates, declines, and leaves. This is a drama that we have. It's not the whole cycle. It's only a small part of the cycle. Let's say a third of the cycle. And it's every 7 years, more or less, no? Mm-hmm. Like an election. There are anticipation, preparation, and afterwards there is election, and then after a certain time, okay, well, things come back to a certain routine. The excitation is only at this moment. So that's what we are going to say. Now, when the conjunction, the effect of conjunction disappears, is dissipated, of course there is something which returns to what it was before. The people, the crowd, the mass. It's the government of the mass, the collective government, which replaces the government of the monarch, of the president, of the dictator. That's the dialectic we have, politically speaking, socially speaking. I have made a study 10 years ago about the social movements according to a Saturn cycle. It's a booklet which has never been translated into English called Astrology according to Saturn. It is not exactly the system that I explained today, but you have the basis of it. But it's a sort of anti-system. Because in this booklet, I study what happens after the conjunction, when the conjunction is not any longer effective. And this is the time of the revolution, the time where the leader is rejected. Because the power of the leader, which was accepted during the conjunction period, when the leader loses its strength, when the leader is naked, as you see in one of Andersen's tales, then there is a revolt, there is a revolution, a rebellion against the leader and his power. Which means that no longer after the decline of the conjunction, when Saturn starts to separate a little more from one of the 4 fixed stars, which are Aldebaran, Regulus, Antares, and all Fomalhaut, then there is a reaction. And this is this reaction that I studied in this booklet 10 years ago. But in fact, the paradox is that precisely this is a sort of counterpoint. It is not there. Here you have the disjunction. The disjunction is only the period which follows immediately the conjunction, and the conjunction is also what follows not the disjunction but the sort of standstill, status quo that exists between the time of the conjunction and the time when the memory of the conjunction itself is not any longer completely present and completely conscious. That's what I wanted to tell you today.